Chosen ones, your pain is a huge portal. Only 1% understands this. There comes a moment in your life when pain stops being just pain. It stops being a random misfortune. It stops being something to escape from, and instead it becomes a doorway. A massive, invisible portal that opens only under a specific kind of pressure, spiritual pressure. And that moment, when you finally realize this, when you stop running from the pain and start leaning into it, everything begins to change. But only 1% ever get there. Only 1% ever truly understand that their deepest wounds are not scars to hide, but codes to unlock. If you're watching this right now, you're not here by accident. Something inside of you has been whispering, or maybe even screaming, that there's more to your suffering than what meets the eye. And that whisper is right. You've felt it, haven't you? That unshakable sense that your life has never been normal, that you've always been a little different. Maybe it started in childhood, feeling like an outsider in your own family, sensing things others didn't, feeling emotions so deeply that the world often felt unbearable. Or maybe it came later, in the form of betrayal, loss, heartbreak that ripped something open in you that never quite closed. You've been through things that would have destroyed most people, and yet, you're still here, breathing, searching, watching this. Why? Because you're not just anyone. You're a chosen one, and chosen ones are not born into ease. They're born into fire.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
Let's be clear, being chosen doesn't mean being better. It means being burdened with a path that most people will never walk. It means having your soul cracked open so wide that divine light can pour through you, but only after it's been purified by immense pain. That pain is not random, it is sacred initiation. And the reason it hurts so much is because it's not just breaking your heart, it's breaking your illusion. Every time your life falls apart, every time something is taken from you, every time the rug gets pulled out from under your feet, that's not life being cruel. That's the portal opening. But here's the thing most people miss. The portal doesn't open outward, it opens inward. The pain doesn't take you somewhere else. It brings you deeper into yourself. And what you find there, in the darkest chambers of your soul, is not weakness, it's power. Raw, unfiltered, untamed power. Power that was buried beneath all the masks you learned to wear to survive. Power that was hidden behind all the roles you played to be accepted. Power that was silenced under the weight of trauma, shame, and fear. But once the pain gets deep enough, it forces you to stop pretending. It strips you down to the core, and in that core is where the portal lives. So here's the question: what if your pain isn't something to heal from, but something to travel through? What if it's not the enemy, but the guide? What if the things that hurt you the most were actually the exact things required to activate your purpose? That breakup that shattered you, that betrayal that made you question everything, that loss that left you hollow, those weren't accidents. Those were thresholds, sacred rites of passage. And the reason they hurt so much is because they were waking you up. Not just emotionally, but spiritually, energetically, cosmically. The universe doesn't waste pain, especially not for chosen ones. Every ounce of your suffering has been encoded with information, with memory, with spiritual technology. But here's the catch: that technology only activates when you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, What is this trying to show me? That shift in perspective is the key that turns the lock. It's what separates the 1% who awaken from the 99% who repeat. And once you make that shift, the pain becomes something entirely new. It becomes a map, a compass, a teacher. But make no mistake, this path is not romantic. It's not the kind of awakening that's filled with incense and soft music and instant peace. It's violent, it's raw, it's ruthless in its honesty. Because it will ask you to give up everything that isn't real. It will ask you to look in the mirror and confront the parts of you that are built on fear. It will ask you to grieve versions of yourself that kept you safe but small. And it will not stop until you are empty enough to be filled with truth. That's why so few people make it through, because the ego is loud and convincing. It will tell you to numb the pain, to blame others, to stay angry, to stay safe. But you didn't come here to be safe. You came here to be free. And freedom only comes when you walk all the way through the fire, not around it, not above it, through it. And when you do, when you finally surrender to the pain instead of resisting it, you unlock something ancient, a remembrance, a knowing, a connection to the divine so real it feels like home. You begin to feel the presence of something larger moving through you. You begin to channel wisdom that you didn't learn from books. You begin to see through the illusions of this world. And you begin to realize that every time your heart broke, it wasn't a breaking, it was a widening. So that more light could enter, so that more truth could live there. So I ask you now, will you keep running from the pain? Will you keep numbing it, blaming it, resenting it? Or will you turn around, face it, and walk through the portal it's been hiding all along? The sacred pain signal, how your suffering is trying to guide you toward divine alignment. There's something sacred about pain that we've been taught to ignore. We live in a world that glorifies comfort, that tells us pain is a problem to fix, an inconvenience to numb, a signal that something has gone wrong. But what if pain isn't a malfunction? What if it's a message? What if pain is not the sign that you're off track, but the sign that your soul is calling you back to the path you were always meant to walk? Most people never realize this. They get stuck in loops fighting their pain, running from it, medicating it with distractions. But chosen ones, especially, cannot afford to ignore pain. Because for us, pain is not just an emotional experience, but it's a spiritual compass. It's how the divine speaks to those who are destined to shift the frequency of the world. Think about it. Every time you ignored your intuition, every time you betrayed your truth to make someone else comfortable, every time you stayed in a space that your soul had already outgrown, didn't pain follow? Maybe not immediately, but eventually it showed up, not to punish you, but to redirect you. That's how sacred pain is. It doesn't come to destroy, it comes to align. It doesn't show up to hurt you, it shows up to wake you. And if you can begin to see it that way, everything changes. You stop fearing pain, you start listening to it. You start using it as feedback. Because here's the simple but powerful truth: pain only lingers when we avoid the message. It intensifies when we resist the transformation that it's asking for. It becomes chronic when we stay in situations, relationships, and mindsets that are no longer in harmony with the vibration of our soul. And chosen ones feel this far more intensely than the average person. Why? Because we're wired differently. We're not allowed to settle. We're not allowed to stay asleep. We're not allowed to dim ourselves just to fit in. So the moment we deviate from our path, our bodies, our emotions, even our dreams start to scream. That's not dysfunction, that's divine design. But here's where it gets even deeper. Pain doesn't just show up to correct you. It shows up to reveal you, to strip away the false layers, and the masks, the conditioning, the inherited beliefs. Because the version of you that the world taught you to be is not the version that your soul came here to embody. And pain is the scalpel that carves away everything that isn't you. It's precise. It's targeted. It goes straight to the places that you've been hiding from. That's why it hurts so much. Not because you're being punished, but because you're being unmasked. And in that unmasking, something incredible happens. You start to remember who you really are. You start to feel the pull of your ancient self, the version of you that existed before the trauma, before the expectations, before the fear. You start to reconnect with your original blueprint, your divine assignment, your true voice. And even though it still hurts, that pain becomes sacred. Because it's not just a signal anymore, it's a guide. It's pointing you home. So let me ask you, what is your pain trying to tell you that you've been refusing to hear? What part of your life is out of alignment, and what would it cost you to finally face it? These are not easy questions, but they're questions that only the brave, only the chosen are willing to ask. And they are the exact questions that start to dissolve the illusion. Because once you know the pain has a purpose, you stop trying to escape it. You sit with it. You decode it. You meditate with it. You ask it, what are you trying to show me? And the answers that rise in those moments are not coming from your mind. They're coming from your soul. This is the power of sacred suffering. It not only brings you into alignment, it initiates you into a deeper relationship with the divine. You start to realize that God is not punishing you through your pain. He's communing with you. He's calling you inward. He's stripping away the noise so you can finally hear the frequency of your own spirit clearly. And once you start living from that place, you become unstoppable. Not because life gets easier, but because you're no longer fighting the flow. You're no longer betraying your inner truth. You're no longer outsourcing your worth to systems and people who were never meant to define you. You begin to walk differently, speak differently, love differently, because you're no longer reacting from wounds, you're responding from wisdom. And that wisdom was born in the fire. It came through the portal of your pain, and now it's yours to carry, to share, to embody. From breakdown to breakthrough, the alchemy of turning pain into power. We've been conditioned to believe that breakdowns are the end of the road. That when things fall apart, when the job is lost, when the relationship ends, when the anxiety becomes unbearable, when the depression sinks in like a fog, we're somehow failing, that we've taken a wrong turn. But what if the breakdown isn't a failure at all? What if it's the beginning of something sacred? What if your entire life has been orchestrated not to destroy you, but to deliver you into a state of total surrender, a state where your ego finally breaks open wide enough for your soul to emerge? The truth is, every breakdown you've experienced has been a spiritual event, even if it didn't look like it. Even if, at the time, it just felt like chaos or despair. What you didn't see in those moments was what was being burned away. Every false identity, every limiting belief, every outdated version of you that was built to survive but not to thrive. But all of it had to collapse. Why? Because you can't build divine power on a foundation of fear. You can't step into your higher purpose while still carrying the weight of who you were pretending to be. Breakdowns are initiations. They are sacred invitations to come back into alignment with what is real. And the pain you feel when everything crumbles, that's just the price of transformation. That's the friction between who you've been and who you're becoming. The caterpillar doesn't get to skip the cocoon. It doesn't get to fast forward through the messy, formless stage, and neither do we. But here's the secret. The cocoon isn't death, it's alchemy. It's where the old dissolves so the new can be born. It's where pain becomes power, but only if we let it. Only if we stop resisting the breakdown and start honoring it. Most people never do. Most people try to bypass the pain. They numb it with distractions, drown it with substances, or spiritualize it with pretty words that avoid the real work. But chosen ones, you and I, we don't have that luxury. We are called to walk through the fire and to feel every ounce of the pain, to let it burn away everything false, and then to rise from the ashes carrying the truth we found in the depths. That's the difference. That's the path of the 1%. Not because we're special, but because we're willing to be broken open, willing to question everything, willing to sit in the void with no map, no answers, and still say, I trust this. I trust that something bigger is working through me, even if I can't see it yet. And that kind of faith is not soft. It's not passive. It's fierce. It's forged in the fire of experience. It's born when you've been brought to your knees over and over and still choose to rise. And when you do rise, when you finally come out the other side of the breakdown, you carry something that cannot be bought, taught, or imitated. You carry authority. The kind of authority that only comes from having walked through hell and learned how to alchemize it. You start to see your story differently. What once felt like punishment now feels like preparation. But what once felt like chaos now feels like divine choreography. You realize that the people who hurt you were not just villains, they were catalysts. You realize that the losses you mourned were actually sacred space being made for something greater. You realize that your darkest moments were actually the womb of your awakening. But here's what no one tells you. The breakthrough isn't a single moment. It's a choice you make again and again. Every time you choose love over fear. Every time you choose truth over comfort. Every time you choose to keep going when it would be easier to give up. That's the real breakthrough. It's not some dramatic Hollywood scene. It's you quietly reclaiming your power in moments when no one is watching. And that power, it starts to radiate through everything you do. You begin to speak with more clarity. You start to move with more purpose. You become magnetic not because you're trying to be, but because you're aligned. Because you've cleared out the noise. Because your energy is no longer fragmented. Because you become a living embodiment of resilience, authenticity, and divine truth. So let me ask you, what if your greatest power is hidden inside the very thing you've been trying to escape? What if the pain you thought would break you is actually the fire that's forging you into the version of yourself you came here to be? This is the alchemy of the chosen ones. We don't avoid the storm, we become the storm. We don't run from the darkness, we learn to see in it. We don't wait for a savior, we awaken the divine power that's been sleeping inside us all along. And when we do, we don't just transform ourselves, we become the permission slip for others to do the same. We become the evidence that pain is not the end. It's the portal. The sacred, terrifying, magnificent portal into everything real, but the awakening embodied, living as the portal, not just passing through it. There's something almost no one talks about at the end of a spiritual awakening. Everyone focuses on the breaking, the darkness, the pain, the ego death, the lonely nights, and the silence. But what happens after the portal? What happens when you've walked through it? When you've cried every tear, let go of every illusion, burned every false identity to ash, and what remains is something unrecognizable to who you used to be. Here's the truth: the final phase of awakening isn't about transcending the world. It's about embodying your soul inside it. It's about becoming the portal yourself, not just passing through it once, but living as it every breath, every step, every moment. When you emerge from the cocoon of your suffering, you don't come out as a butterfly just for show. You come out as someone who now carries the path. You become a living transmission of everything you've learned. Your presence becomes a frequency. Your energy starts to shift rooms. Not because you're trying to be powerful, but because your authenticity is now rooted in something real, something earned. And that's what separates those who merely talk about awakening from those who embody it. Embodiment is the deepest level of initiation. It means your healing is no longer something you strive for. It's become your state of being. You wake up differently. You see through things faster. You no longer need to explain yourself to people who are not ready to meet you. You no longer chase what doesn't resonate. You stop trying to convince others of your worth. Not because you become arrogant, but because you finally know who you are. You're not just aware of your power, you're anchored in it. And that anchoring creates a gravitational field. People feel it. Some will be drawn to you. Others will be repelled. That's part of the design, because when you become the portal, you become a mirror. You reflect back to others the truth they've been avoiding in themselves. And here's where the responsibility begins. When you've awakened, your life is no longer just your own. You become a vessel, a steward, a bridge. You carry codes that other people need, but they won't find them in your words. They'll find them in your embodiment, in how you show up, in how you hold space, in how you love without attachment, in how you speak truth without aggression, in how you sit in silence without needing to be seen. That's when you know the portal has become you. You're no longer waiting for signs, you are the sign. You're no longer searching for the path, you are the path. But none of this makes you immune to life. You'll still feel. You'll still be challenged. You'll still face grief, loss, and uncertainty. But now, you face it differently. You face it with grace, with clarity, with an inner strength that nothing outside of you can touch. That's the gift of becoming the portal. You no longer fall apart the same way. You no longer get lost in the illusion. You recognize the patterns. You see the sacred in the ordinary. You walk with a quiet, knowing that everything is happening for your expansion. And you trust it, not because it's easy, but because it's true. Allow me to ask you something now, something only your soul can answer. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to heal and started living as someone who already has? What if the final layer of your awakening is not about doing more inner work, but about boldly embodying who you've already become? Think about that. Because the truth is, you're not broken anymore. You're not lost anymore. You're not becoming, you've arrived. The only thing left to do is live it, to integrate it, to walk it out, one breath at a time. And yes, the world may not understand you. People may doubt you. Systems may try to box you in. But you didn't come here to be understood. You came here to remember. You came here to lead. Not with noise, but with presence. Not with force, but with frequency. You came here to become the evidence that pain is not the end, it's the beginning of a life so aligned, so sacred, so powerful, that even your existence becomes a revolution. So now, after everything you've endured, everything you've released, and everything you've become, the question remains, will you live as the portal? Will you trust what you've embodied enough to walk through this world as the awakened one? Or will you shrink again, just to make others comfortable? This is your moment, not the beginning, not the end, but the activation. The turning point where you stop trying to get somewhere and realize you are the destination. You are the chosen one. Your pain was your portal. And now, your life is the message. Live it like a sermon. Breathe it like a prayer. Walk it like a warrior of light. And remember this, there's no going back now. Only forward, only truth, only soul.